This week on Capitol Report, Governor Lamont delivers his State of the State address.
Let's focus on what we can do here in Connecticut to build on the progress that we have made over the last 6 years.
With a common denominator.
It's time for lawmakers to get down to business.
We have a longer legislative session this cycle, giving us an opportunity to get in the weeds, lift up the hood.
Took the restrictor plate off, give the Red Dragon a little more juice. But let's keep that on the down low.
The big issue this session, utility rates and energy.
Everyone was mad as hell looking at their bills following the hottest July.
$187?
Also on the agenda,
I want to do outreach to get more men into teaching.
Can we tell our parents?
No! Just trust me, they don't want to know anything about this. Keep it zipped.
as we fill the tank for a big year in politics.
And don't forget, I drove from Canada, our 51st state.
Bienvenue. Capitol Report starts now. Welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutching. We are so glad you're spending part of this Sunday alongside the power panel. The mayor of Bloomfield, Connecticut, Danielle Wong, joins us. The coach, Doris Sim, was former Speaker of the House. Gavel envy last week.
A little bit. I saw Matt waving around.
And look who's in the middle, the governor of the state of Connecticut, Ned Lamont. We'll get to you later. Liz Karanowitz.
Good morning.
Republican President Johnny Mack back with us. All right, guys, let's get into it. Well, last week kicked off the start of the 2025 legislative session. Lawmakers headed back under the Golden Dome. Panel and I were fairly confident that we'd hear the words fiscal guardrails during Wednesday's State of the State address. Well, that didn't happen thanks to Ned Stir, but issues surrounding affordability and opportunity were key themes during the speech. The other issue that did get a lot of attention in the governor's speech had to do with utility bills, the cost of energy in Connecticut. Here's the governor on both. Watch this.
By paying down these legacy costs, we've made our state employee pensions much more secure, and we freed up hundreds of millions of dollars in our budget to expand access to affordable child care, affordable health care, expanded education opportunities. And we're just getting started. Every business thinking about expanding here in Connecticut or moving here asks me, no, they're not asking me about incentives. I know they're asking me about the reliability and affordability of electricity, as everything we do gets more energy intensive.
So what do Republican leaders think of Governor Lamont's address? Take a listen.
There are other more substantive proposals we could have talked about. I didn't hear anything about the fiscal guardrails today. That concerns me. We've got to address that up front. Are we going to keep our promise to the constituents of Connecticut, or are we going to violate those guardrails?
I like the governor. It was nice enough. There was a lot of nice platitudes, but there wasn't any substance. I would have liked to have heard some substance from the governor on what he was actually going to do to reduce energy rates.
Well, the budget, this address is really not the substantive address. As I said, this is like eating this dessert first. This is like having the cake and the ice cream and the coffee and the peas and the carrots, Governor. That's coming in February. But, you know, you talked about the energy stuff, and, you know, Liz also bangs a drum every single week on more membership pure. You kind of poo-pooed all that during your speech.
Yeah, you want substance. Cosmetic is going from 3 to 5 commissioners. Happy to do it if you want to do it. Won't make a dime's worth of difference. What makes a difference is adding on more generation, expanding supply. And that's what we hit hard in that speech, different ways we can get there and what we got to do. And secondly, efficiency, reduce demand. Less demand means lower prices for everybody.
But Governor since Grasso's State of the State address have been talking about lowering the cost of energy to Connecticut. At some point, it's going to have to happen.
It's going to have to happen, and I told you how you do it. You want substance, increase supply, reduce demand.
Johnny.
Well, yeah, and for years, there's so many issues that conflict with that, right? There was an opportunity to put a liquefied natural gas tanker in Long Island Sound to bring more natural gas into Connecticut. People talk about building more pipelines. You run into environmental laws, issues related to people who don't want to do that. It's a tough issue, but we need more into Connecticut. That is the answer. And we should look at expanding nuclear power, I think. And you mentioned that, Governor.
I met with Bob Blue just the other day. He's the CEO of Dominion, saying, what do we do to expand carbon-free nuclear power right here in Connecticut? We're part of the ISO region. We're talking.
Yeah.
Governor, one of the big things, though, that we saw over the summer in particular, thanks to some transparency bills that were put in by the legislature, is the fact that people got to see that the state, in effect, was using the utility companies as tax collectors, right? I mean, that was really what drove up prices and gave that shock value. And that's what Republicans have been trying to deal with going back to last session, right? I mean, you know, there was some bipartisan agreement, and now you've got a new session where I think you're going to continue to see some renewed calls to handle some of those taxes and how we're, you know,
public benefit charges, not taxes. 80% of that is related to nuclear power at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, where often we make money on that, and that's good, or sometimes we lose money when natural gas is cheap. You can have the taxpayers pay for it. That was a proposal. I think it's a dumb idea.
Did the governor give the towns and cities enough in his address, or are you going to wait for February?
So we're going to have to wait to February. You know, such as the conversations that we've had in the past, our towns and cities are kind of left on the outskirts. We're not privy to that inside baseball, what's happened to the Capitol, right? We saw that letter from Eversource come out to the cities and towns, throwing a little shade to the legislature in Pura and things of that nature. And the ratepayers are left like, well, what does this mean for us? You know, we're going to invest less in infrastructure. Are our bills going to go up? What are the facts? And so as a mayor, I'm left with those questions on the table and trying to make sure that the constituents that are the ratepayers, that are the ones that really matter in this kind of the tuggle and the toggle back and forth between Pura, the legislature, the governor, and things like that. So I'm, you know, really waiting on some answers from the legislature, and I'm hoping that the governor will come to the table with those folks and really just sit everybody down and really say, let's figure this out. The ratepayers need answers. What's going to happen tomorrow? So
yeah, you know what, Governor, a lot of your predecessors on those speeches would come out with some big new shiny project. John Rowland wanted to invest in Bridgeport, Hartford, and New Haven, and Dan Malloy had his first 5. I thought, you know, I think it was Mark Paznioka said, your North Stars were opportunity and affordability. That affects everybody in the state of Connecticut. How would you talk to people about how do we make Connecticut more affordable? Because you talk about building a bigger pie rather than slicing up the pie we have. How do you get to that?
Well, thank you. I'd like to talk about growth every day because, you know, for 20 years we didn't have any growth, and it was like a game of Hunger Games, less for you, more for me, less, you know, that's no way to run a railroad. Look, tax cuts for working families, child tax credit, not child tax credit, but the earned income tax credit, what a difference that makes. Biggest middle class tax cut in our history. I think that makes a difference. And then I spent a fair amount of time, John, talking about, as we've done, you know, energy prices and also healthcare prices and pharmaceutical costs, ways that we can bring things down. I need some help with the legislature on that.
Joe.
Yeah, Governor, I think you've done a great job. Everybody knows the legislature is its own beast and it's tough to navigate. I think you've done a great job during your terms. I've been very vocal about that. And your style is conducive to the legislature. You don't stand up there like other governors and preach to them what they have to do. You're asking them to think differently. Do you think with whether you're running again or not in the next term puts that in limbo at all? Does it hurt you? And, you know, people like all of us are saying, Gov, you got to run again, but you're still standing back a little bit. Does that put you in a difficult spot going into the session?
Well, first of all, I did try and engage the legislature.
Yeah.
And I said, look, insurance, what do you want to do about this flooding? And I should have said wildfires at the same time. You know, artificial intelligence, do you want to be a regulatory leader or do you want to be an innovative leader? As regards the whole re-election stuff, as I've said, you know, a couple hundred times, everybody's constantly running for office. I've got a really important legislative session coming up. The federal government is putting things in flux right now. Let's get through that. Let's get our job done. I love the job. I think we're doing okay. I think people feel like we're in a better place than we were 10 years ago or something, but time will tell.
All right.
But how about those pesky guardrails, though? So now we're going to talk about the guardrails because we spent last week doing a massive of guardrail talk, and you talking about guardrails, and you didn't even mention it. Well, you kind of alluded to it, but you know the Democrats in the legislature are going to come to you to ask you to loosen them. They're going to say they don't want to get rid of them. They just want to have a little more leeway to spend more money.
Just a tweak.
A tweak. They just want to tweak it. Now, is that a proverbial nose in the barn, and then once the door's open, then it's out?
Let's establish our principles. I made a point of having an honestly balanced budget. I said that 6 years ago. No offense, but we hadn't had an honestly balanced budget for 20 plus years, and it was a bipartisan train wreck. I came into office despite the 2017 deal, and we're looking at $2 billion deficit. We often put operating costs onto our credit card for kids to pay down, you know, in the next generation. I just didn't want that to happen. And I don't want that to happen in this session as well. So we can argue about guardrails, but you got to have a budget that is honestly in balance so we get that done on time, and that's what I'm going to do.
One of the things, though, that my takeaway was you didn't talk about guardrails by name, but you did make very clear we can't go back to the old way of doing things, right? And I think we talk about guardrails all the time. It's very insider jargon, but when you talk to the public and you're you know, talking to people when you're out at visits, they're talking about taxes and spending and affordability. And so the guardrails are what deliver those outcomes, right? I mean, I think so, you know, in terms of framing the conversation, you didn't say the words guardrails, but you made it very clear, at least from my perspective, that we're not going back to the old habits and the old way of doing things.
Real people don't want to hear guardrails.
No, they don't know what that means.
They need to understand what were the old ways. When I was there were a time where we took out economic recovery notes. We borrowed to pay off interest on our borrowing. So you go to a real family and you say, okay, you're going to take out a second credit card just to pay the interest on your first credit card, even though you're not paying down your first credit card. And they're like, that's crazy. No family would do that in Connecticut. Why is our government doing that? And I think that's the message.
And remind people the value of these budgets and what it's meant. State employees, your pension is much more secure than it was before. We've gone from the worst just to way below average, but we're making some progress anyway. And secondly, that's $500, $600, $700 million a year extra we can invest under the spending cap and make a difference for people.
Yeah, and teachers' pensions as well.
And teachers' pensions as well. Thank you.
Personally, I was hoping that you would rename Long Island Sound Connecticut Sound. That's what I was looking for. And the Granby Jog. I'm sick of looking at that little X. The hell with Greenland. You know, send the National Guard.
Take back the knot.
I want a straight line across the state of Connecticut. No more Granby Jog. That's not Massachusetts, Governor.
Connecticut Sound. I like that. It's got a ring to it.
All right, guys. Up next on Cap Report, the governor is sticking around. News 8's political reporter Mike Cerulli will join us to talk about the governor, about a few issues he addressed during the State of the State that yet may not have caught. Stick around, the great Cerulli. Really, the mics. Well, we already discussed a few of the big picture issues from Governor Lamont's State of the State address last week. There are a few other items to note that we'd like to discuss, and that is where Newsday's political reporter Mike Cerulli steps in. Mike, you were listening closely in the hall of the House the other day. You kind of got some stuff that was left on the floor. What do you got for us this morning, Mike?
Yeah, good morning to you, Tom. Let's get back to that energy discussion. Take a listen to this line of the governor's speech.
We bring in very inexpensive natural gas from Pennsylvania, but that pipeline is at capacity. And we bring in LNG by foreign ships, which is much more polluting and more expensive. You can ask Congress to rethink the Jones Act.
Governor really testing the crowd with that Jones Act line. Hey, look, leave it to Ned to bring up like a World War I act during his, right? What do you got, Mike?
Yeah, so my question for you, Governor, is, look, we're a state with a strong maritime tradition. We're also a state that has a lot of communities. You heard Representative Chris Rosario applauding that line. There are a lot of communities that care about the Jones Act and would like to see it go away. So between the interests of the jobs that the Jones Act creates and the communities who would like to see it go away, I think they're both curious, Governor. What specifically did you mean when you said you want Congress to rethink the Jones Act?
Yeah, I like Rosario applauding. It was like one person. Well, like the other Rowan and Martin's laughing.
105-year-old law, Governor. No one else knows what it is.
Here's the deal, Michael. You go up to, say, offshore wind, and we bring in all the turbines on an international ship. 6 turbines, 6 windmills. Then you got to offload it, put it onto an American ship, one by one, send it out. You're driving up the price of offshore wind by, say, 20%. Same thing with natural gas. So we could bring in natural gas, not have to buy it on a European market, but bring it in from Galveston on an international ship. I could bring down the price of natural gas by 20%. It's a law that goes back to the late 19th century. We got to have our own merchant marine. I think Liz is shaking her head, but I think it would save people money dramatically here in this state.
All right, Mike, you got topic number 2 for the Gov.
Yeah, this is another one that I'm not sure many were expecting. Here's the clip.
I got a DEI initiative, which maybe folks on both sides of the aisle might appreciate. I want to do outreach to get more men into teaching.
I found this one interesting as well, Governor, because it kind of echoes something we've heard from Senator Chris Murphy and others. The author Richard Reeves has written a lot about the struggles of young men today. And I want to ask you, we know there's a lot of interesting policy proposals on this, but politically, your party is struggling right now with reaching young men. Do you have any thoughts on that challenge in parallel to the challenge of the policy issues as it relates to helping our young men out?
First of all, that clip, you could hear crickets when I finished. But look, we need more men in teaching. These young men need a role model. They need more coaches, by the way, not just teachers. We need them in the classroom and on the playing field. Most of our so-called disconnected people, most of them are young men. I need them back in the game, and I think having a role model, a mentor in the classroom, the playing field, makes a big difference.
All right, guys. Thanks, Mike. Up next on Cap Report, are you ready for 4 more years of the Trumpster and how that might affect Connecticut? We'll discuss this with Governor Lamont when we get back. Do not go away. It's really looking very stupid.
And in 2 weeks, we say hello to President-elect Donald Trump 2.0. Look, over the next month or two, we'll have more insights into how our changing relationship with the new administration will affect our budget and our people.
About the return of Donald Trump to the White House coming very early in Governor Lamont's State of the State speech. What happens in Washington will certainly have a ripple effect or perhaps a tidal wave of what happens here in Connecticut. Governor, here you're heading down to the inauguration. What sort of message are you looking from the Trump administration? You told Danny Howe you're not going to any of the balls because the wine is terrible. So what are you trying to accomplish? You know, we did notice that during the campaign, you didn't go out with any Democratic governors like Maura Healey or the governor of Michigan to basically get on the trail along with Kamala Harris. After Trump won, you didn't join the governors basically in a kind of a firewall against Trump. You said nice things about Lyndon McMahon. You seem to be a guy that can work with Donald Trump, a former resident of Greenwich, as you know.
I'm governor. I've got to work with who's ever in the White House. Look, no question about it. I worked hard for Joe Biden some years ago, and I worked hard for Kamala Harris. I think that would have been the best way for our country to go. That said, President Trump was reelected, and when he invites you down to the inauguration, I'm going there because what that means in terms of the peaceful transfer of power, what that means for respect for the president.
You're going to be a lonely man down there, Governor. Only 4 Democratic governors have RSVP. Danielle, are you cool with that?
No, absolutely. I think as governor of the state, you have to make sure that you have those open channels and relationships to the White House. You know, when it comes to the federal dollars incentivizing how we respond, I think that's really important to negotiate that, especially when it comes to our educational system, when we count on so much federal allocations for the public school system. So on the ground here, we're really kind of watching and learning. As we know, President Trump in the past has been vindictive as it relates to not getting what he wants. So building that relationship is absolutely critical moving forward for our state.
But I think, you know, Governor, is that sort of just your business background? Is that just who you are? I mean, we see so many politicians now say, we're not going to work with Donald Trump. We're going to fight with him. You see a guy like John Fetterman say, he's the President of the United States. I represent everybody in my state. I'm going to work with him when I can, and I'm going to criticize him when I disagree with him. Why aren't we seeing more of that in politics? It just seems like it's the right thing to do.
You start off trying to find common ground, see if there are places we can work together. Like Danielle says, let's not pick a battle unnecessarily where they penalize the state of Connecticut. But we may have some battles down the road, but we'll be ready, you know. If you're going to start deporting 16-year-old dreamers at Guilford High School, I'll be standing up.
And Liz, finally, a lot of bipartisanship speaking of that, you know, in the legislature with Candelora basically nominating your friend Ritter. Right?
Yeah, that was historic, and I think it does have a big impact in terms of how you proceed going into the legislative session, right? I mean, you've got a House where, for the first time, you have the minority leader nominating the Speaker of the House, which I think sends a message to everyone in the building. We're working together. You want to do things in the House, you're going to have to work with both of us. So from that perspective for you, you know, you've been known to be somebody that's more concerned about making the right deal than who's...
Right, Ned, cut her off.
Why? I thought
All right, well then we'll go to commercial then. Next on Cap Report, a closer look at one of the more controversial additions alongside Connecticut highways when Cap Report returns. Do not go away.
You know what I was thinking about that.
Straight out. During Governor Lamont's State of the State address, he gave a tip of the cap to Chief Marketing Officer, our pal Anthony, and he shot out some of the series of modest welcome to Connecticut signs, declaring us the pizza capital, the foodie capital, the submarine capital, the basketball capital. Right, Governor? Other states gave you a little heat for this, but let me ask you, what else do you see going on in Connecticut as far as future signs? What do you want to see? You got something up your sleeve, I know.
Why be modest?
That's right.
We're such an understated state. No way. I like the fact that everybody's talking.
All right, how
about
about the NIP capital?
The NIP capital.
That's a good message.
I like the music festival capital. We all know the governor has fun at the music festival.
We're talking about during break. I want first in flight, Gustav Whitehead.
You really
I want to put it on the border, Governor.
Everybody.
And we'll I'm sure North Carolina and Ohio.
He invented flight, that guy, right?
Wiffle ball capital of the world.
Lobster roll. We've got a much better lobster roll than Maine. Come on.
Capital Report, capital of the world.
Yeah, that's the winner.
All right,
that was an easy one.
guys, that'll do it for us for the mayor,
the coach,
the Gov, Lizzie, Johnny Mac. I'm Tom Dutchick. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. See you guys next week.
Fun, guys. Thanks.
Now we watch that on this.
All right, let's go.